Welcome. Today, we're not just learning about economics, we're launching an investigation. We're going to look at the stories we're all told about the great economic thinkers, because as you'll see, the history of economics isn't some straight, neat line. It's more like a crime scene, full of misinterpretations, missing persons, and some seriously twisted theories. So, think back to your first economics or political science class. You were probably taught that the world of global political economy is this epic battle between these three big ideas, right? Realism, liberalism, Marxism. But what if I told you that this tidy little story is missing some really crucial clues? What if the whole thing is basically a history read backwards? Okay, first we need to get our facts straight on the official story. This is what's known as textbook GPE, or global political economy. It's the standard version of events you get in most intro courses, and it pretty much frames our entire understanding of how the global economy is supposed to work. Now, a lot of this framework comes from scholars like Robert Gilpin. And notice he didn't just call them theories, he called them ideologies. These big, self-contained worldviews where each one claims to explain, well, everything. It's a simple way to organize things, maybe a little too simple, you know? And here they are, the usual suspects. You've got realism, where states are just duking it out for power. Then there's liberalism, which is all about free markets and individual choice. And of course, Marxism, focusing on class struggle. This three-way split is the official story. It's clean, it's clear, but as we are about to find out, it's also deeply, deeply flawed. And this, right here, is where our investigation really kicks off. The biggest problem with the official story is that it reads history completely in reverse. It takes our modern theories and forces these historical thinkers into boxes they were never meant to be in. So here's our first big clue, what scholars call the 19th century overlay. Basically, it's the habit of looking at thinkers from, say, the 1700s, but through the glasses of much later ideas, especially the ideas that came out of the marginalist revolution in the 1870s, which is when economics got way more mathematical and abstract. It's kind of like trying to understand Shakespeare by only reading a modern movie script based on his play. You lose all the original context. And this timeline just lays it all out, plain as day. Look at this. Adam Smith publishes his masterpiece in 1776. Then, almost 100 years later, economics totally changes. Then, another 100 years after that, in the 1970s, modern textbooks are written. And what do? They take this new, abstract version of economics and slap it all the way back onto Smith. The original meaning is just gone. So you know what? Let's open the case files. We're going to put two of the biggest names from the textbooks, Adam Smith and Friedrich List, under the microscope and see exactly how their stories got so twisted. Let's start with Adam Smith, the guy everyone calls the father of free market capitalism. The textbook character paints him as this cheerleader for pure, cold self-interest. But the reality? Oh, it's so much more interesting. Smith was a moral philosopher. His main goal wasn't just about making money, it was about creating a good, functional society. He thought that for markets to even work, people needed virtues, like sympathy, understanding how others feel, and self-command, basically keeping your emotions in check. And check out this quote. This reveals a side of Smith the textbooks almost always seem to forget. He wasn't just for free markets. He was a fierce critic of colonial monopolies like the British East India Company. He called what they were doing a violation of the most sacred rights of mankind. That's a powerful anti-colonial stance that just gets totally erased from the official story. Okay, next up, Friedrich List, the supposed poster boy for protectionism. The simple story is that he hated free trade and thought the state was everything. But again, the reality is way more complex. List saw protectionism as a temporary tool, like training wheels for a developing economy. His ultimate goal was actually for Germany to get strong enough to compete in free trade as an equal to Britain. And that's where his brilliant metaphor of kicking away the ladder comes from. He wasn't arguing against the ladder of free trade itself. No, he was calling out the hypocrisy of rich nations like Britain, who used that same ladder to get to the top, and then, once they were there, kicked it away so nobody else could climb up after them. So, we've seen how the stories of these famous men got twisted, but our investigation has uncovered an even bigger crime, I think. The key figures who were just left out of the history books entirely. This is the case of the missing economists. I mean, really, where are the women? If you look at most textbooks, feminist GPE is treated like this modern invention, something tacked on in the 1970s. But that's not an accident. The fact that female thinkers were marginalized is a direct symptom of this exact same flawed backwards reading of history that distorted Smith and List. So let me introduce you to some of these missing persons. People like Maria Edgeworth, Jane Marcet, and Harriet Martineau. They were hugely important in the 19th century. They weren't just writing about economics. They were making these incredibly complex ideas accessible to everyone, from children to adults. They were unbelievably influential in their day, but they've been almost completely written out of the official history. And their exclusion wasn't just some oversight, it was deliberate. Listen to this quote from Alfred Marshall, one of the leading male economists at the time. He's basically saying that women will never again get famous by dumbing down economics into simple tales. You can just feel the condescension, can't you? It perfectly shows how the contributions of these women were actively pushed aside and trivialized. So, why does any of this matter? This isn't just some dusty old academic debate. Rewriting history like this has huge consequences for how we think about our economy and even ourselves right now. It actually shapes the fundamental assumptions that run our world today. At the very heart of modern economics, you find this character, Homo Economicus, or economic man. This is the idea of a person who is hyper-rational, purely self-interested, and is constantly calculating costs and benefits to get the most for themselves. And this concept is often presented as a timeless, natural truth about who we are as humans. But here is the final, mind-blowing twist in our investigation. This modern Homo economicus would have been totally unrecognizable to someone like Adam Smith. For him, economic man was a social creature, someone who cared about their status, their reputation, and their place in society. Their actions were always tied to a moral context. The modern version, this hyper-rational calculator completely detached from society, is a pretty recent invention, not some eternal truth. And that's really the final verdict. By reading history backwards, we take a very specific, very modern, and very pro-market version of humanity, and we pretend that it's just how things have always been. This distortion makes one particular ideology feel natural and inevitable, and it erases all the more complex, more social, and more moral economic ideas of the past. So that leaves us with one last big question. We've sort of closed the case on the twisted theories of economics, but it opens up a much bigger one for all of us. If this official story was a complete rewrite, designed to make a modern idea seem timeless, what other histories, what other official stories that we've all been told should we maybe re-examine? What other ladders have been kicked away?